Hello everyone, thank you for joining on call today. This is a webinar for LaunchPad training. I'll be going over general functionality of LaunchPad. I'll be currently using our AP Psychology course, but any of the features I go over today can be applied for any LaunchPad course you're planning on teaching today. There is a chat feature here in Zoom, so if you have any questions, I'll save the Q&A session till the end of the session today. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and log into the instructor sign-in page here. I'll go ahead and click on sign in using my email address and password. And this will take me to the dashboard of LaunchPad. I'm going to go ahead and click on Create Course. But please note that if your school is using either Clever or ClassLink for roster integration, then your courses, teacher, and student accounts will be made automatically for you. Because I'm not using rostering integration, I'll be creating my own courses to get my students to self-register into these courses. So I'll go ahead and click on Create Course here. Verify that this is for the textbook that I want to log into. Go ahead and click on Next. I don't want a course copy in this case, but we do have this feature here. So I'll just go ahead and select No and then select Next here. At this point, I'm just going to fill in the details of my course. So I'll put in the title of my course. The course number and section number are optional fields. I'll put my name, my school name, the start of the academic term, my time zone, and for LMS ID, we're not going to prompt students to provide their campus LMS ID. This isn't necessary for our high school folks. So I'll go ahead and click on Create here, and that will create my LaunchPad course. Now, if I'm teaching multiple sections, I can go ahead and click on Create Another Course to create another section that I'm teaching, for instance. Alternatively, what I can do is create master course and branches. So underneath this course that I just created, if I wanted to create a branch from the master course, all I have to do is click on Branch this course. Yes, I'd like to branch this course. And I would designate this as Section 1, for instance. Go ahead and click on Create. Again, if I needed to create another section, I'll go ahead and click on Branch this course. Designate this as perhaps Section 2. Click on Create. So I'll create sections, as many as I need to, off of my master course. So by structuring it this way, any changes that I make to my master course will make those changes to my subsequent branches. For instance, if I were to assign a quiz in my master course, that quiz will also be assigned to my subsequent sections down below. It just makes things easier for you as an instructor to build your material. You can think of the master course as essentially your planning course. And I don't necessarily want my students to register into that planning course, right? I would want my students to register directly into the Section 2 branch and into the Section 1 branch as well. Again, with rostering integration, you don't have to do any of this because your courses would be auto-created through the integration. And again, that's with Clever, and that's with ClassLink integration. But if I'm not using integration, what I would want to do is I would want students to self-register into these branch courses. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and click on Activate and Activate again. And this will give me registration instructions to give to students. So I'll use the LaunchPad only instructions because I'm not using integration. And basically the most important thing about this message is that unique web address that is populated here. You'll notice that at the end of this link, it provides my unique LaunchPad course ID. So I'm ensuring that all of my Section 2 students in this case will roster directly into my Section 2 LaunchPad course. I'll go ahead and click on Done, and you'll notice that my closed course is now open for student registration. And I'm going to go ahead and activate my Section 1 course. So I'll go ahead and click on Activate, Activate again, and I'll have a different set of instructions to send to my Section 1 students here. And again, this web address is unique to my Section 1 students. So I'll know that they're registering directly into their appropriate branch course that they need to go into. Okay, I'll go ahead and click on done. Let's say that you didn't save that message, right? And you need to go back and send the email out to students. All you have to do is click on view activation message. It'll bring up that message again so that you can issue this out, perhaps send this in an email so that students can register into the course. Now, to describe for you how registration would work for students, when they're navigating to that specific web address that gets generated, they're going to see that they're logging into your course, and they'll create their usernames and passwords by entering their first name, last name, email address. They'll create a password, and then they're essentially going to be prompted to choose one out of 3 options. The first is to either purchase an access code. The second option is to enter an access code that was already purchased. And the third option is for students to go through free trial access, which is 14 days free trial access into the course, into LaunchPad. Now, if students do work during that free trial access period, all of their work will be retained. So when that trial access expires, they're going to have to redeem a full access code to continue on in the course. But again, their work will be retained at that point. Now that I have my courses activate, I'm going to go ahead and log into my planning course to do all my work. And again, if you're just teaching one section, there's no need to create master course in branches. All you would do is create a course, and you'll notice that for every course you create, the unique web address is generated, and you can access your activation message to send that email template out to students to register into the course. But under the circumstance that you are teaching multiple sections, I'm going to go into my master course to build up my assignments the way that I essentially want to. You're going to be faced with a welcome screen. And then from here, all I'm going to do is click on enter your course. And this will take me to my master course. You'll notice that I did not activate my master course, and there's a reason for that. So I'm going to go ahead and let's say I need to go back to my dashboard for one reason or another. I'm going to hover over my name, click on switch create courses, and that will take me back to the dashboard here. So the reason why I don't want students in there is because there could be a circumstance where I might have to make an adjustment in my section 2, and I don't want that adjustment to reflect in section 1. Right? So had I designated my master course as section 3, that really wouldn't cut it for me, only because if I wanted to make a change in section 3, provided that was my, under the circumstance that that was a master course, right? I can't help but sync those changes across the board, right? So instead of designating my master course as a section, I'm gonna leave it as an empty course with no students, without prompting students to register into that course. So I might be under the circumstance where, let's say I wanted to change a deadline for section 2. I'll go into my section 2 and adjust that deadline. That deadline won't sync to my section 1 course because I made that change in my branch section. Only when in your master course does the change reflect globally across the board, across multiple sections. So this is why I organized it in this way, under the anticipation that I might have to make slight adjustments between my sections that I don't want to globally sync across the board for all of my sections here. All right, I'll go ahead and click into the master course again. I'll click on, and it'll take me directly into my homepage of LaunchPad. Now, LaunchPad is a platform where you can access the ebook, the student and instructor resources, and our assessments all in one place. And again, I'm working in an AP psychology course, but the functionality is going to remain the same no matter what course you're teaching here. So what I'm going to do is, if I want to access the ebook contents, I'll just have to expand these sections here, and it'll take me to ebook pages. So if I go ahead and click into the Unit 1 introduction, it'll take me to an ebook page. And I have the ability here to be able to, right now it's taking me to the table of contents view with the introduction to Unit 1, So if I wanted to get into section 1 in part 1, for instance, I'll click on psychology and its history. That will take me to that particular ebook page. And you'll notice that I already have notes and highlights already created at this point, which is a matter of dragging or using your cursor to highlight a particular section. And I can color coordinate that. So red for confused, green for definition. I'll go ahead and choose green, add the highlight. And for every highlight that you create, you can certainly add a note. All of the notes and highlights that you create get deposited into the notebook section here. And I can sort my colors and my notes in a specific way. So if I'm just looking for my notes and highlights for all of the notes and highlights I was confused about, I will essentially just check mark my red highlights. I can also filter my notes from newest to oldest, oldest to newest. If I needed to go back to the ebook page, I'll just go ahead and click on ebook and that will take me back. If I want to go back to the home page, I just click on the home button in the top left. And like I said before, the home page is where you can access the ebook, but it's also the same page where you can access your resources embedded, right? Such as a learning curve activity, for instance. Sometimes when I'm reading the ebook, I might not want to skip over those assessments because it would break my concentration when I'm reading through the ebook, right? For instance, if I head into Unit 1 and click into, let's say, Unit 1, Part 1 Review, right? This will take me to an ebook page. I'll go ahead and click on Next. I'll keep clicking Next, and you'll notice it takes me to an assessment here, right? So as a student, if I didn't want to break my concentration there, what I can do is instead of staying on the home page here, I can go to the ebook only section of LaunchPad, which it will only show the ebook pages here, right? So it'll make things more streamlined in terms of reading the ebook content in this way. So I don't have to skip over those resources embedded in these subunits here. There is another way to access the ebook. So in the top right corner, you'll see that help feature. If I hover over that, a menu option will appear and I can download offline ebook, which is the student edition, and I can also download the teacher's edition here. So if I click on download offline ebook at this point, this is going to open up into a completely new browser tab, and we partner with VitalSource to host our ebook contents. So you can think of this as an alternative way to get to the ebook. So you have multiple options here. It really depends on the user's preference in terms of how they want to access the ebook. Either you can access it directly from the table of contents view in LaunchPad, or you can launch into VitalSource ebook to get access that way. And you'll notice in the web address, it will say VitalSource up top here. Now, in the VitalSource ebook, I can also make notes and highlights as I go. So if I find a section that I want to highlight, in the same way, I'm going to use my cursor to grab a particular section. Let's say I want to color coordinate this as red for confused. And for every highlight I create, again, I can certainly add a note. So I'll go ahead and add a note. All of my notes and highlights get deposited over to the left in the notebook section. And you'll notice all of my existing notes that I created in LaunchPad also shows up here. So basically whatever LaunchPad or whichever ebook platform I should say that you're using, whether or not it's LaunchPad or VitalSource ebook, all of the notes and highlights are centralized and going to sync into a singular notebook for users to access at this point. So I can actually export my notes and highlights from the notebook section. So if my students are using Microsoft OneNote, I can have them sign in with their Microsoft account to export their notes out into that platform. Alternatively, what I can do is I can click on the print icon, which will print out specific pages, notebook pages that I want to for my notes. And I can dictate what notes I want to print from. So if I didn't want to print out all my notes for every unit, I can just select Unit 1. Let's say I just want to print out my notes for Unit 1. So I'll select that, click on Print, and it'll launch me into print preview mode. So you'll see a list of my highlights, my notes. Printing in color is quite expensive, so you'll notice that instead of printing this out in red for confused, green for definition, the labeling colors, right? You'll notice that up in the right where the posted highlight and note is located, it'll tell you that I was confused about this particular section because I highlighted this in red, right? And you'll also notice the date in which I initially added that note and highlight. You'll also notice because I'm operating in Google Chrome as my browser, I can change my destination file, so I can print out a physical copy, but I can save my notes and highlights as a PDF on my computer, or I can save this as a PDF in Google Drive. I'll go ahead and cancel out of this, exit out of my print preview tab, click on cancel, and this will take me back into my ebook. Now over to the left navigation panel, the library is where you can access all your textbooks. So if students are adopting multiple textbooks from Bedford Freeman Worth, they'll see a collection of their textbooks in their library. A large part of the time, they might only have access to one textbook that they can find visible in the library, where that home icon is located there. If you're not sure what any of these icons do, if you just hover over it, it will tell you what it does. So these three little lines that you see here, it will indicate the table of contents, where I can scroll down and get to specific units in my ebook. I can also use the magnifying glass to search for specific terms using the search bar there. The notebook we accessed earlier is featured here. If I wanted to access all of the textbook images, I'll be able to access it from here. It'll consolidate all of my images in one location. And then if I wanted to create my own virtual flashcards, all I have to do is click on that plus icon, and that will allow me to create a new deck of cards. I'll call this chapter 3, for instance. Click on save. And then I'll add cards to that deck. So I'll put in the term in the front, the definition on the back. I could also put images on my virtual cards. Click on save once I'm finished. Now, you're not seeing it right now, but there will be a navigation panel that pops up at the bottom there. The reason why you're not seeing it is because that tends to disappear when students are reading to make the reading process seamless for students, right? So nothing is barring their way through reading the text. But if I click on the white space behind the text, you'll notice that horizontal panel appears. So if I wanted to navigate to a particular section in my ebook, I could just type in the page number. I can bookmark specific pages within the book. I can use the scroll bar to get to different pages within the book. I can also print out ebook pages. There is a page per limit because you're printing directly from the publisher. You can also change the formatting options here with the ebook. So I might want to increase the size of the text, as you'll see here. I can change the default font to open dyslexic if I have students with dyslexia in my classroom. Default fonts. I can change it from day mode to night mode to sepia toned. I can also change the margin sizes. I can also condense the text or double space it or triple space it. Let me also go into another ebook page so I can show you the formatting options a little bit more clearly. Now, right next to the enhanced formatting tool, you'll also have a read aloud feature here, which is basically an automated voice will read out to students once you click on play. There is a settings option here where you can adjust the reading speed as well. So I can make it slower, I can make it faster, depending upon my preference there. The tool here is just another fast highlighting option. And if I need to cite specific sections within the book, I can cite my through MLA, APA, Harvard format here. Okay, there is a settings icon here down below in the bottom left-hand corner. If I scroll down, there's a read offline with the Bookshelf app. So I'll go ahead and launch into that, download the app. and you'll be able to see our supported systems. So you'll be able to download the ebook on an iOS, Android, Kindle Fire, Mac, PC, Chromebook. And it will be the Vital Source Bookshelf app that you're downloading. And you'll log in with your credentials to access the ebook. If I hadn't mentioned it already, as soon as you click into this ebook, right, so if I exit out of the ebook, and right now I'm back into LaunchPad, as soon as you click on the help feature and download offline ebook, it's actually going to prompt you to create credentials into Vital Source, like I mentioned, and you'll use those credentials to sign into the app that you've downloaded if you want to download for offline use. Okay, I'll go ahead and exit out of this and head back into LaunchPad. This LaunchPad, you'll also have access to download the Teacher's Edition from here as well, which will also launch into the Vital Source ebook. Now, if I want to get back to my home page, because right now I'm viewing the ebook only view of LaunchPad, I'll click on the home button. That will take me back to the home page here. And embedded within our sections, not only do we have ebook components, but you might have some sort of assessments in here, formative assessments like learning curves, sprinkled throughout. Now, our popular resources are added by default into LaunchPad, but we do have other resources tucked away. Now, reason being is we didn't want to add all these resources all at once. So we would want the instructor to curate a list and add resources when they need to utilize them, right? So with our popular resources, you'll have something like learning curves. I'll go ahead and click into that. Learning curve is a pass or fail assessment. So as long as students complete it before the deadline, they'll get full credit upon completion. So if I wanted to assign a learning curve, I'll just click on the assign button in the top right. In the calendar widget here, I will select a deadline, July 31st in this case. I can allow late submission until grace period. I can also set the time in which this is due as well. With grace period, a number of minutes, hours, weeks, infinite that I can schedule or have it as a policy here. I can uncheck that if I don't want to implement a grace period. I can also schedule an email reminder for students a number of days, weeks, hours in advance. I can also put in a point value. Gradebook category, let's say I want to put this for 20 points, and we'll put it in a learning curve category. So I'll just call it learning curve. Click on add. And once I'm finished, I'll go ahead and click on assign. Now what you'll notice is before I click on assign, the settings for the entire class is disabled because I have to assign to the entire class first, right? So I'll go ahead and assign it for July 31st to the entire class. Now it's going to allow me to add an individual or group of students from my roster. And I might want to do that if I wanted to add an extension to an individual. So I'll select that individual from my roster. And you'll find that student in your roster there. Add that student. And then you'll utilize the calendar widget to schedule a different deadline for that specific individual or group of students. Other editing capabilities, basic info is if you wanted to change the name of the assignment, add a subtitle. The assignment tab is where we're just located. We're essentially going to assign a deadline and point value here. The settings tab is where you can schedule your visibility. So right now I have it visible to students, but I can hide from students until a visibility date. So I can schedule the date and time that it's going to open up for students. And I'll go ahead and click on save. So basically, if you hide from students until a visibility date, they'll know that they have to do a learning curve, right? But when they click on the link for a learning curve, they're going to be prompted with a message basically saying that they can't begin the assessment until this date and time, right? Because the assessment will open up in this case on July 31st at 3:27 p.m. I'll go ahead and click on done editing here. We'll save those changes. So what a learning curve does, I'll go ahead and preview as a student. Now, I have this worth 20 points, but the target score is 450. So what that essentially means is when students are answering these questions, If they get the answer correct, the 15 points will be added towards their target score. So the whole purpose of this is for students to accumulate as many points as possible to reach the target score, in this case 450. And when they finish the assignment before the deadline, they'll get 20 out of 20 points or 100%, because I had dictated this is a 20-point worth activity, right? So you can assign it for however many points you want to assign this for. You can think of target score as the goal students need to hit to complete the game. We don't penalize students for incorrect answer choices here. We would actually want to encourage students to make mistakes and learn from them, especially with concepts that are entirely new, right? So let's say as a student, I'll go ahead and click on an answer choice, submit answer. I got this correct, so you'll notice that the 15 points have added to my target score here. So if I move on to the next question, you'll notice that the question value has increased. So this is actually an adaptive quizzing engine. So the better that the student does in answering these questions correctly, the more challenging the questions become. If I answer the more challenging questions, I will accumulate more points because the challenging questions are worth more points. I'll finish the assignment sooner, right? So it could take one student less questions to reach the target score. It could take another student to build up to the more challenging questions, so they might have to take more questions to reach the target score. So if I were to type in an answer here, click on submit, I got that wrong. I can go ahead and click on get a hint, which you'll notice I'll receive a hint here. They'll get penalized just a little bit, but like I said, we're not actually like deducting points from the total score here, right? Because this is worth 20 points. We're just dropping the value of the question, right? Because it used to be 20 points. It dropped to 10 points because I made an incorrect attempt here. If I go ahead and click on show answer, no points will be added towards the target score. I'll be able to see the answer to the question. Can move on to the next question at this point. There are live links to the ebook page on this topic, so it does a split screen. And there's no penalty for students to go back to the ebook. We would actually want them to go back into the ebook, right, to do the reading. So it will go into that specific section this question is referencing. And I'll be able to make highlights and notes as I go if I needed to. I can also enter into my existing notebook as well. I can exit out of the ebook by clicking on the X button, and it'll take me back to continue on in this activity here. Now, if I end preview as a student, as an instructor, in terms of what you'll get is you'll essentially see analytics on how well students have performed on a learning curve activity. For instance, I can see my entire roster here. I can see that Ada has a green check mark, so she finished and reached a target score. In fact, she went above the 450 target scores. Is essentially when students reach the 450, 450 is the target score in this case. The target score could vary depending upon what unit you're in. But once she reaches the 450 target score, she'll get a congratulations message, but she can click on continue for more practice if she needed to have more practice. She won't get extra credit for that, but if she needed to go back, perhaps because this is an AP Psych course, she might want to go back to this towards the end of the year if she needed to prep for the AP exam, right? Now you can see how many questions it's taking students to either reach the target score. So for Ada, it took her 25 questions. Like I said before, it could vary between one student versus another, how many questions they're taking. You'll also be able to see the percentage of accuracy for the entire class. So under topic performance details, I can see where the areas of weaknesses are with my students. In this case, it's 63% accuracy for today's psychology and its approaches. So as an instructor, I might want to address that particular subunit with students. Now, if I wanted to see specific performance details, I can click on Ada, who I know completed the learning curve, and I'll be able to see her own performance details. She'll be able to see her own. She wouldn't be able to compare herself with other students. As an instructor, you'll have full visibility with the entire roster here. So for Ada, she might want to expand today's psychology and its approaches. And we'll give her a suggested study plan here, where she will essentially click into resources or an ebook page where she might want to read up on that topic to improve her understanding of the material at hand. Okay, now one thing I didn't mention earlier is prior to assigning a learning curve activity, you can certainly edit the topics at the very least. So what that does is if you're not teaching on a particular subunit, I can choose to exclude that topic so that students don't receive questions from that topic, right? So I'll be able to make those adjustments there. And you'll notice that the target score will adjust accordingly based on what I'm excluding. I'll go ahead and exit out. I can also edit the target score. So the next question becomes, how do I know what the ideal target score is? You essentially wouldn't know unless you're having students do a learning curve in the first place, because you don't know what type of knowledge students are bringing in the classroom at this point, right? So when you're assigning a learning curve activity, especially for Unit 1, and you're finding that they're taking way too many questions that they need to, or if you're finding that they're taking too long on a learning curve, right? It could be a few things. Perhaps it's a challenging unit, or perhaps it's too rigorous for them and you just want to lower the target score at least in the beginning. And towards the later units, you might want to increase the target score accordingly, depending upon student performance at that point. Right, so you want to get them and build them to the more difficult, essentially the difficulty level here. Okay, so I'll go ahead and click on the home button here. And I'll take us back to the home page of LaunchPad. Now, regardless of what LaunchPad you're looking at, you're always going to have some sort of assessment, right? So one way you can find it is either it's going to be embedded in your subunits. In this case, I see it listed here. If you don't know where the learning curves or your assessments are located, you can simply just over to the left, click on the resources icon, and you can filter your resources by assignment type or content by type or content by chapter. So in this case, I'm going to filter my resources by content by type, and it'll give me a list of student resources up at the top and instructor resources down at the bottom here. So if I'm not sure what I have in my LaunchPad course, this is a good way to find what's located in here because it'll give me a list of resources. So if I'm looking for an assessment type, and quite easily I can see that I have summative quizzes here. So I'll go ahead and click into that. Now you'll notice that this particular summative pre-built assessment that I have in here isn't added to my course. And I can tell because the status is not in use. So like if I go back to content by type, which goes back to my previous filter under student resources, and click into something like learning curve, which I know is already added by default in my LaunchPad course here, you'll notice that the status is in use, right? So that's the main way that you can tell what has already been added to your course versus what hasn't already been added. So I'll go back to content by type. We'll take a look back at the summative quizzes. So if I want to add any of my resources to the course, let's go ahead and click on Unit 1, Part 1 in this case. There's going to be an Add to Course button in the top right corner here. I'll click on OK. And this will add my Unit 1, Part 1 summative quiz to my LaunchPad course. Now you'll notice because I was expanded in Unit 1, it added that Unit 1, Part 1 summative quiz in the unit I was expanded under. Right, so you would essentially want to be conscious about where you're located, because if you accidentally add a resource in the wrong unit, you'll be able to drag and drop this for sure. So if you made a mistake, no worries there. But if you already know where you're located, it would be a lot easier for you to just place it where it needs to go, right? So for instance, if I were to expand Unit 2, for instance, right? I know for a fact that if I go into my resources at this point, anything I add will add under the unit I'm expanded under. So let's say I accidentally added the Unit 1 resource to my Unit 2. Click on OK. That's completely fine. You'll notice it will add that Unit 1 Part 2 under Unit 2 because I was essentially expanded under that unit. All right, so to fix that mistake, all I have to do again is drag and drop this to where I want to place it. So let's say I want to place it into my Unit 1 folder. It's as easy as dragging and dropping. Okay, so once I added those assignments into my LaunchPad course, right, so I'll go ahead and expand into Unit 1 because I know that I added a Unit 1 Part 2 summative quiz here. I'll go ahead and click into it to preview the questions I already have in this assessment, right? So I'll go ahead and scroll down. I have what it looks like 24 questions in this assessment, but I might want to make edits at this point. So something like a learning curve, which is a formative assessment, the only editing capabilities you could do with a formative assessment is choosing to exclude topics that you're not teaching on, right? Because of the nature of what a learning curve does. It's really meant for students to assess students on foundational concepts and skills that they should know when they want to be successful in this course, right? It's learning curve is very much a reading comprehension tool, right? But something like a higher stakes assessment, you can, as an instructor, make further edits, right? So if I go ahead and click on edit in the top right corner, we'll go through each of these tabs. So you'll notice some of these tabs look very familiar to you because we saw some of these editing capabilities in Learning Curve, for instance, but you'll have more capabilities here on a higher stakes assessment for a reason, right? Because of the nature of what assignment we're looking at here. So for basic info, I can change the name of the assignment. I can add a description here. Under search questions, this is where I access my test bank. So I can filter my questions. Let's say I want to filter my questions by unit. Or if I scroll down, I could filter it by module. So let's say I'm looking for questions for module 1. Apply those filters. And it'll give me my results, which is 25 questions out of 68, which means we're only seeing 25 in this list. But if I click on show more, it'll show me more results as I go. Now, 68 is quite a bit of questions to look through, so I can narrow down my results if I needed to. So for instance, let's say I'm just looking for multiple choice questions. I'll go ahead and apply those filters. So it will essentially narrow down my results here just a bit. I can also add a filter for level of difficulty by Bloom's level taxonomy, right? So I'll be able to use these additional filters the way that I need to do that to find specific questions. In your search results, you'll click on a question. You'll see a question preview. And if you're satisfied with the question, you can certainly click on Add Question. Right now, I have 24 questions in my assessment as it stands. And you can see that under the Review and Modify tab. So if I click on Add Question, it's going to bump that up to 25. Right? And you'll notice that under the question preview, it will tell you the metadata here for that question. Right? This is Bloom's level of understanding. The level of difficulty is moderate. This is a multiple choice assessment. This is a question that is used, or basically you can use this question because it's coming from the Module 1 test bank. So if you're creating an exam that covers Module 1, you're essentially covered, right? Because it's a Module 1 question that you're looking at here. So you'll add questions, as many questions as you need. So let's say I want to add the second one in my list. I'll click on Add Question. It'll bump up my assessment from 25 to 26 questions. Now I'll go to Review and Modify, and this is where I can make my final adjustments here. Like if I wanted to move questions around, I can move questions around. If I wanted to remove questions, I can delete it. Deleting a question from LaunchPad, especially questions that we created as a publisher, they won't be deleted permanently from LaunchPad. It just reverts the questions back to our test bank. So you don't have to worry about losing any questions because, again, you'll find those questions again in the test bank. I can also create new custom questions myself. So if I wanted to create my own multiple choice question, I should say, essay question, multiple select, I'll be able to do some from there. Now, I have a choice at this point. I can print this out and distribute this as a physical exam to give out to students, or I can move on and click on the Settings tab to make my adjustments, administrative settings if I were to host this online. For instance, I can increase the number of attempts from 1 to 2. Perhaps I want to take the highest score in this case. out of 2 attempts. I can enable a passcode, so students can't begin the assessment unless they know what the password is, and you would set that as an instructor. Time limit, you can schedule how long it will, you can limit the time in which students are spending on this assignment, for instance. Question delivery, do you want all questions to appear on one web screen or one question at a time? You can allow save and continue, which means students can save their work, exit out, and come back later before the deadline, or you can disallow that feature. You can randomize question order and answer order within the questions. You can have it where students see solutions after every attempt, due date has passed or never, or variations of that depending upon the situation. Like there might be a circumstance where, yes, I do want students to see whether or not they're right or wrong after every attempt, but I might not want them to see the full solutions till after the deadline has passed. And then lastly, I can schedule visibility. So I can hide from students until a visibility date, and I'll be able to see the date and schedule the date and time from here. Now, just like before, once you set these settings for the entire class, let me go ahead and save it. And it's getting me to enter a passcode, so I don't want to enter a passcode there, so I'll go ahead and save it. I can make my adjustments to an individual or a group of students. So like, for instance, I might want to increase the number of attempts for a student, or I might want to increase the time limit for a particular student or group of students. I can make those adjustments here accordingly. And then lastly is your assign due date tab, which is the same thing that we saw before. You'll use the calendar widget to schedule a deadline and point value. So I'll schedule it again for July 31st. We'll set it to 10 points in this case. And I can put it in a new category called quizzes. Click on add. And I'm going to raise this up to 30 points. And then once I make my adjustments, I click on assign, and that will assign my Unit 1 Part 2 summative quiz. I'll go ahead and click on done editing. Click on the home button. This will take me back to LaunchPad. Now, what you'll notice is that anything that you assign in LaunchPad will separate those assignments out between assigned material versus unassigned material, right? It makes things easier for students to spot what needs to be done because there's going to be a to-do label there, and it's going to organize these units in the order in which their assignments are going to be due. Alternatively, students can go into the calendar view and see their assignments from the calendar and open it up from here. Now, as a student, they don't have editing capabilities. As an instructor, you do. And as an instructor, you can also drag and drop to a new deadline here. So let's say I want to move this deadline to August 1st. Go ahead and click on the home button. That will take me back to the home page of LaunchPad. Now let's say you wanted to create your own assessment from scratch rather than using the pre-built assessments from the resources, right? So what you're going to do is click on add new. Again, we're on the home page of LaunchPad. Add new, and you can add a bunch of things here. Like I can add my own unit. I can add my own collection of documents, a Dropbox assignment, a video assignment. But in this case, I'm going to add a quiz. And I can rename this quiz as a test, for instance. And you'll notice the editing capabilities are the same that we saw before. The only difference is you don't have any questions already loaded up into this assessment because you're building it from scratch at this point. So you're going to walk through all these tabs, grab questions from the test bank under the Search Questions tab, review what you have created, meaning review all the questions you've added to the quiz or the test that you're building, and you'll use the settings icon to make your administrative adjustments to the assignment policy, and then you'll schedule a deadline for this assignment. I'll go ahead and click on Done Editing. I won't save that. Go ahead and click on the home button. It'll take me back to the home page of LaunchPad. Now there are other resources in here in LaunchPad. So if I go back into the resources icon, I'm still filtered under summative quizzes. So I'll go back to content by type, which will go back to the previous filter where I can see all my student and instructor resources down below. So generally, you're going to have some sort of assessment type that we saw before, learning curve, which is a formative assessment. You might have videos here under the student resources. Again, The resources will vary depending upon what course you're teaching. You're always going to have instructor resources down below as well. Now, for our AP course offerings, you're always going to have some sort of correlation guide to the CED, to the College Board, right? Because we would want instructors to be prepared and to help them build their curriculum for the year based on the AP skills that students will need to, essentially will need to learn. Sometimes you might, generally what you'll have is lecture slides. So if I go ahead and click on the lecture slides, in this case, lecture slides for Unit 1, this is gonna open up into a PowerPoint slide that's gonna be pre-built already with the images and text aligned to the book. And you have editing capabilities to make adjustments there. So if you wanted to add your own images and text, you can certainly do so. I'll go ahead and click back into the home button. And if I want to go back to the previous filter, again, I'll click on content by type. So those are the student and instructor resources. Actually, let me load up into that PowerPoint slide since it's now downloaded. So we'll be able to see a list of, and this is just for the Unit 1 that I downloaded at this point, but you'll have it for all your units or chapters. Usually, typically we have target scores in the beginning, or targets, learning targets, I should say, in the beginning of the slide there. And I'll go ahead and minimize that. Now, in terms of Gradebook, I'm gonna hover over my name, click on Switch Current Courses, because I wanna show you a populated gradebook, and a populated gradebook would be in my different course here. So I'll go ahead and go into my previous course, enter the course, and we'll head into the gradebook here. All right, so I'll go ahead and click on Gradebook. So for short response assessments, it will require the instructor to grade manually. In this case, I already gave a 10 out of 10 score for this particular student. But if I click on the score that I had given to students, you'll be able to see their short answer response from here. And in blue, we'll generally have a suggested response or a rubric to base the student response off of. And sometimes the answers will vary depending upon what question you're looking at here. If I wanted to add feedback, I can go ahead and click on Add Notes. And I can also insert a templated feedback. Go ahead and cancel out of that. Under Module 2 Review for multiple choice questions, any of our multiple choice assessments are going to be automatically graded. So you'll see the score populate here. And if I click on the score, I'll be able to see what students, like in this case, G student here, had answered question number 1 incorrectly. And the correct answer was nature nurture in this case. And I can certainly also add feedback and insert a templated feedback here for multiple choice questions as well. You'll notice that next to the scores, there are additional numbers here. This records time spent on the assignment at hand. So right now and I did this pretty quickly as a student, but I only spent 2 minutes on this particular activity as a student. So you'll be able to see the minutes spent there. Now, if I needed to export these scores out, I just click on Export Scores, and it'll give me 2 options here to export it out into CSV or TXT file formats. Go ahead and close out of that. If I want to go back to the home page, I click on the Home button here. I do want to go over some course management features here. So over to the left, one of the items or the tabs that we didn't take a look at yet is the Instructor Console. I do want to head into that. So I'll click on Instructor Console here. We'll click on General Navigation and LaunchPad Settings. You'll want to come in here if you wanted to make adjustments to your course name, for instance, right? Perhaps you entered in the wrong course number and section number, so you can make your adjustments here. That's under General. Navigation, as I mentioned before, when you log into LaunchPad or when students log into LaunchPad, they're gonna see that welcome screen before they enter into the course. So you can choose to include that welcome screen or exclude it. So I can make that adjustment there. LaunchPad is just basically how you want to present those units on your homepage. So for instance, perhaps I want my past due items to collapse if the items were due more than 14 days. So by default, I could collapse those items, right? Or I can choose to sort my units by due date, which is ideal, I would imagine, in a circumstance to make things easier for students to see what is due, right, in the order in which it's due at this point. So I can certainly check mark that as an option. I'll go ahead and click on the home button to get back to the home page. We'll go back to Instructor Console. We also have something called batch item settings. So if I know that I am going to use learning curves in LaunchPad, right, I'll select learning curve. I can select them all and bulk update my assignment settings. So I can update the point value and the gradebook category in bulk. This does not allow you to bulk assign. This just allows you to bulk update the settings for the assignment. All right, so like for instance, the reason why learning curve is showing up is because it's a formative assessment. You don't necessarily have to assign a learning curve for students to do it. But for a higher stakes assessment, like a summative quiz or an exam, like a unit exam, you have to assign those in order for students to have visibility to them. And you as an instructor can control visibility through the assignment settings, right? So that's why you see learning curve listed here. Had I chosen a different item, let's say an end of review assessment, which at this point I only have one added and assigned to my, or one assigned to my course right now. Had I have, under the circumstance where I assigned other final exams, or in this case, a unit exam, I can select multiple exams in bulk, and I can set global changes across the board for my assignment settings. So I can set my number of attempts. I can add a time limit. I can have it so I can disallow or allow, save and continue. All of these assessment settings that I showed you earlier, you would be able to basically set that globally across the board. Okay, this just makes things easier for you as an instructor to get this set up on your end. I'll go ahead and click on the home button here, and we'll go back to the Instructor Console. We'll have roster and groups. So this is under the circumstance where, if you recall, you can assign a resource such as, like, let's say we're assigning a summative quiz, right? I can assign it for the entire class, and I can offset an extension to an individual or group of students. You can set your groups in advance, right? So I can create a new group set and add students to that group set to have that ready in advance, right? Because there might be some students that need support in my classroom. For instance, if I have students with IEPs, I might want to create a new group set there so that I know that I have to support them. So when I'm assigning my activities for the entire class, I might have to make minute adjustments for those group of students depending upon what their needs are. I'll go ahead and click on the home button to get back to the home screen of LaunchPad. We'll click on Instructor Console again. I skipped batch due date updater. Like I said before, you can't batch update. Generally, instructors don't really do that because they tend to have different deadlines for each assignment or each activity. What a batch due date updater does, it's really more useful for you when you're course copying, right? So if you're planning on using the same materials this year as next year, you can course copy materials into the new course for next year, but the old deadlines will also carry over. So what you would essentially do is you would grab your old deadlines and shift it to a new start date so that it just makes things easier down the line. When you already know what materials you're going to use, all you have to do is make adjustments with deadlines at that point. Now, once you shift it to the new start date, you might have to fine tune the deadlines a bit, right? Because maybe, well, at least with the situation right now, like maybe you didn't consider like a holiday, for instance, that you would have to like make that adjustment for next year. And I would make those minute adjustments from the calendar view. As I mentioned earlier, you can drag and drop deadlines to a new deadline So after you shift those deadlines around, you can fine tune those deadlines in the calendar view there. Okay, last thing with Instructor Console is Gradebook preferences. So generally, instructors tend to use their own gradebook systems at your school, but you can certainly use our gradebook system here in LaunchPad. So you'll notice that anything I assigned in LaunchPad, I had placed it in categories. So I can add weights to my categories and dictate what those weights will be. I can also drop lowest scores for each category if I needed to. The one important thing I would do if you're not going to really rely on our gradebook and you just prefer to use your schools, I would definitely check mark this at the very least. So 0 scores for unsubmitted assignments after due date has passed. So we don't turn this on by default. So if you want your zeros to be recorded in your gradebook, especially if students haven't submitted, again, before the deadline, you're going to have to check mark that feature. Okay, I'll go back to the home button. And that's it for the Instructor Console. At some point during the Instructor Console walkthrough, I mentioned that you can exclude the welcome page. The welcome page is this right here. It's that page right before you log into a LaunchPad course, right? So you can choose to exclude this if you find that you don't really need this page, right? Or if you want to keep this page, you can edit this page, add your own widgets, and I can also add my own custom RSS feeds, or perhaps I want to put in a Scientific American RSS feed. RSS feeds allows you to like pull in articles at random, right? Because you would dictate how many articles you would want to place into this RSS feeds. You would pull in articles in the circumstance where if you wanted to get students to like, you know, really learn or really be aware about the world around them, and pulling those articles, those current events into the classroom, you'll be able to pull it in through these RSS feeds. Go ahead and click on Done Editing here, and we'll enter into the course. And then lastly, under the welcome page is a preview as a student mode. So if you're ever curious to see what students see on their end, you'll be able to launch into student view. Okay, so that's generally how LaunchPad works. One last thing here, if I hover over the help feature, there is a high school support link. I'll go ahead and click on that. You can access our knowledge base, which you can search for our LaunchPad user guides and articles. And you can also contact technical support from here if you need assistance. I'm gonna go ahead and head back into LaunchPad. I'm gonna just take this time to take a look at our chats. The chat window here, because I know several questions came in during the session. So I'll go back to the beginning. So one of the questions, I see your recording. Will this be available later for us to review? Yes, yes. We do have this. It's going to be uploaded on our website. If you don't know where to locate the recording, if you just contact your sales representative, they'll be able to direct you to our websites so that you can access this recording later. So when do we receive access codes for our students? So when your school, now it really depends on a school by school basis. Some schools purchase access codes on behalf of students. Other schools will require students to purchase their own access. So if your school is responsible for purchasing access codes for students, once that purchase order goes through, whoever made the order would have received an access code to distribute out to instructors. Again, if you're not sure where your access code is located, you can contact your sales rep. They'll be able to investigate further, you can go from there. Okay, another question. Hello, is there an option to create student accounts for them? In this case, no. Especially if you're not using integration, you're going to have students self-register into the LaunchPad course. If you're using a rostering integration such as Clever or ClassLink, for instance, basically Clever and ClassLink are student information systems run by your school, right? So your school would handle rostering and student accounts and instructor accounts, and LaunchPad courses would be auto-created through that type of integration. But for a LaunchPad course where you're not going to be using any type of integration, the only option there is for students to self-register into the program. Okay, Next question. My ebook says unable to authenticate, but I have purchased it and was given access days ago. So one of the tips that I would recommend here is you'll notice that if I click on the help feature and download offline ebook, it prompts me to create an account into VitalSource, right? And I have to create credentials into VitalSource. What sometimes happens, it happens more so with an instructor who uses multiple LaunchPads, is sometimes your logins get cached into the browser. So if the browser is getting confused about what login is cached into the browser, you might get an authentication error when you're trying to access the ebook. So basically, to fix that, all you have to do is clear out your browser cache and history and try to launch into the ebook, and you should be good to go, because when you're trying to launch into the ebook, it's going to authenticate your credentials into the ebook, and you'll use either your existing ebook account, or it's going to just take you directly to your ebook because it's going to recognize that you're an existing user anyway, right? So I hope that answers your question there. So that would be the first thing I would do, is check on clearing out your browser cache and history. Alternatively, like I said before, if you hover over the help feature, click on high school support, contact our technical support, they'll be able to walk you through those steps if you have questions on how to do that. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and scroll down to another question. Is there an app for phone and tablet users? So with the ebook, yes, right? You can download the app using the VitalSource Bookshelf app. LaunchPad in itself was really made to be used on a laptop or a desktop. So that, I mean, obviously we would want students to like have a bigger screen to be able to answer questions and type in their responses as they go. So with LaunchPad in particular, we would generally recommend that you use, like I said, a computer or a desktop. For the ebook itself, you can download on an app and you can download it for offline use. So in the off chance that a student didn't have working Wi-Fi that day, as long as they have the app on their phone and they already downloaded the ebook, they'll be able to launch into the ebook without needing internet access at that point. But that's just the ebook that I'm referring to at that point. So next question. Can students download an ebook? Also, yes, referring to the previous answer, yes, you can download the ebook for offline use. When we do receive the student access codes, another person asked when you're going to receive those access codes. Again, you would have to refer to your sales rep on that. Let's see. So how can I tell how many licenses remain available for my course? So what you can do, again, if you contact your sales rep, as long as you provide your sales rep your access code, generally we give out master codes, we'll be able to look up how many licenses are remaining, right? So we'll be able to give you information on that. And then the last question that I have here, are there typed LaunchPad instructions? Yes, so if we go into, and I do want to demonstrate this, we'll go to the help feature, we'll click on high school support, we'll search the knowledge base here. And again, we have this session recorded, so you can definitely go back to the recording to look at the training for today. Alternatively, if I go in as an instructor here, I'll be able to search the knowledge base, and I could just type in questions that I have about LaunchPad. You'll also notice that if I scroll down, I can filter the knowledge base to just look for articles on LaunchPad. So I'll go ahead and click on LaunchPad here. And so if I have questions on access codes, I can go ahead and launch there. If I have questions on quizzes, my test banks, course management questions, likely we'll have user guides already populated here. Let's say you have questions on LMS integration. We have this here as well. Also, if you ask your sales rep, we do have a scheduler for one-to-one training sessions for LaunchPad training. We also have a scheduler for integration training if you're curious about that as well. Okay, so I'm going to check the chat one more time if you all have remaining questions here. And I don't see any additional questions so far. Okay, one more question. Oh, actually, yeah, thank you. This was so helpful. Oh, that's so great. Well, if that's it, then thank you for joining the webinar today. And yes, I hope that this session was helpful for you all. I try to go through every possible nook and cranny with LaunchPad so that you know what to do, so that when you're going ahead and building your own courses, especially if you're not using integration, right? And you're required to build your own courses, you'll know what to do at this point and you'll be able to plan. All right, well, if that's it, then enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and goodbye.